So I'm coming to you on launch day for the new Zhiyun MOLUS G300, and they were very kind and they sent me out 2 of them, and I've got them just here. So this is going to be my review of the MOLUS G300. As I mentioned, Zhiyun have been kind enough to send these to me, and I do have a prior relationship with them where I have received some products from them, so take everything I say with that pinch of salt. Also, in this review, I'm not going to go into exhaustive measurements and getting the spectrometer readings and all of that. I imagine that Luke Serveld or Andrew Locke are going to have that kind of review, and I will certainly be checking out those reviews because I always love what those guys do. So yeah, definitely check those out. This is more an experiential review. I've tested the lights, I've used them on a couple of different shoots, different environments, and really it's just seeing how I pit these against other things that I've used and whether they would be suitable for the kind of shoots that I'm trying to do with them. So it's more within the context of myself rather than empirical numbers, and hopefully you'll be able to look at it and go, that sounds exactly what I want to do with them. So yeah, then in that case it would be the ideal case study for you. If not, hopefully you glean something from it, touch wood. Probably the best place to start with this is by looking at the units because they are absolutely tiny. I say absolutely tiny. It's a weird one. You look at this and you say, okay, that's not really tiny. I mean, it's comparatively tiny, you know, compared to a car or something, but it's a pretty solid unit. It's got a bit of weight to it, but it's what it can do, I think, that makes me think of this as tiny. Now, I'm used to larger lighting fixtures, having come up at a time when we used to use regularly like HMIs and Kinoflows and all that kind of thing. And then moving on from that, we've had powerful LED lights for a good few years now, and that historically has been things like, you know, Aperture 600Ds, the Nanlux series, or Godox have got some very powerful lights coming out, and those are just increasing in power. But as they do so, they're also increasing in size. So if we think about a 600D as something which a lot of people will be very familiar with, that light is kind of this long, at least. This, I would say, you'd get maybe 6, maybe 5 of these in the space of one 600D. Now that makes this even more impressive when you start to consider that in the max boosted mode where you overclock thing in it gives you even more level. This is not the same as a 600D, let's not get too carried away, but it is starting to knock at the door of what a 600D can do, and I've just got it in one hand, you know, it's that small. Now that is not the only thing that comes in the package. You also get the control unit, which I believe is the power supply as well, because you get AC power going in here, and then you have the header cable that goes out to the light, and then you've got your controls on there and everything. So comparing both of these parts of the package, the ballast and the head unit, to other things on the market, this is the size of the whole package, if you like, with the light source and the ballast. Compare that to a 600D and you're still way smaller than just the head unit. Now, obviously on those lights, a 600D or a 300X or 300D, I'm using Aperture as everyone knows those as an example. This, if you're just comparing it to the 300 series, it's still smaller than those as well. And that is where the power point of the light comes in, officially 300 watts. So that's pretty impressive just from a size and scale point of view. Now clearly Zhiyun have gone a different route from the likes of Aperture and Nanlux and everyone else who have been focused on just creating more powerful lights each time. They've kind of come into a relatively mature market now with the LEDs. People are confident about where it's going and they're invested in it, and they're trying to get to a point where they're replacing the bigger and bigger fixtures. So they've come into this market and it feels like they've had to choose a path and catch up with people, but try and make their product unique. And the way that they've done this, and we've seen it in the previous MOLUS series as well, they've just chosen to make the fixtures as small as possible, and therefore that can become the point of difference. The unique selling point is that these things are tiny compared to the other things that you could use in their place. And then within that, they are also gradually building up and creating more powerful lights. But because the market is so mature, I feel like they still need something to catch people's attention. And I think that's where the boost mode comes into play here, because when they sent this through to me and described the light and sent me the press pack of it and all of the details and the photogrammetry and all of that, the fact that it had a boost mode like the previous MOLUS G100, or was it 200, that could go up to 300 watts, and this gets to 500 watts, immediately my brain starts going, thinking, well, with two of these, I could fit them in a backpack. I can take just like an Anker power station. I've got a 555 Anker power station, and I can go out into a remote place with stuff that basically I can just carry, and I can light things to an extent that, I mean, even if I was taking something like an Aperture 300X or an Aperture 300D, I'm still taking way more than this, you know, and I don't think that I would realistically have considered using them in the scenarios that now I'm considering using these in. So immediately gave me a little bit of pause for thought and made me kind of go off on this little mind game of how could I use these fixtures. Now, as well, in the package you're going to get the AC cable, and you're going to get the reflector just here. That's a fairly standard intensifier. It works perfectly well, just snaps onto the front. It is a Bowens mount fitting on these lights, and you can obviously use any of your standard Bowens mount modifiers on them. Now, there are a couple of things that you need to think about with this, because this light doesn't have a yoke, and I think that perhaps is one of the downsides of the fixture. In order to keep everything small and lightweight, you mount onto a baby pin on any of your standard stands just here, and then you can position the light, but having a heavy modifier on the front is going to make it rather front heavy, so you do need to watch out for that. Now, they have made some advancements over the previous MOLUS, which still had that challenge of not having much unit out the back here to counterbalance, and also not having a yoke. They've added a handle on top. Now, I heard a couple of reviewers of the earlier MOLUS lights talking about how it'd be nice to be able to grab onto something and have a little bit more leverage. So they have listened to this and implemented really nice solid handle on top. It's in a sensible place, and holding onto that, loosening off the side just there, you're able to position things really quickly, really easily, and then lock it off. And in my experience, it has locked really well. I mean, this is a solid mount, and I haven't had any issues with that at all. It's ratcheting, so you can just move it around to get a better position, so you can really crank down on it if you need to. There's a tiny little umbrella mount just there, so if you did want to go a very simple route of modification, you can just slip an umbrella into that and have at it. The cable that leads from the header unit to the lamp head has a really nice connection. Makes me think that you're really thinking about all of the different aspects that go into making a light like this functional for people who are out and using it every single day. Now, that connector, and I've got it just here, is really solid, very nicely made. Haven't had any issues getting it to clip in. The only thing that I'm perhaps a little bit sad about is that we don't have the same connector going into the ballast unit, control unit just here. It would be lovely if this was a cable which was separate. That's something I think that people have said from the original MOLUS series as well. It's a good long cable, but I just prefer, as a matter of my personal preference, to have a separate cable for that. It means that if anything goes wrong, you can just get a new cable. I can see there's some cost effectiveness to doing this way. It makes it a little bit easier perhaps to manufacture, and you don't have to get the expensive cable and mount at both ends. So yeah, I can see it, and maybe there'll be other units that come out in the future which are more premium. that will see a separate cable. So that is something to be aware of as well. We do have on the control unit a webbed hanger just there, so you can stick that onto your stand, and I haven't had any issues with it. It's very similar to what some other lighting manufacturers are doing, where you can just hang the control unit on the stand, so it is nice to be able to mount that up. On the bottom, it is rubberized as well. So if you were using it, say, on a table and having it just off to the side, if you've got a setup at home or something, it won't slide around. It sticks really nicely, and you can still access all the controls and everything from there. Inspecting the control unit and the head unit, you're going to notice there are some big fans in these units. They are there to keep everything cool. There's venting all over the back and on the sides, so airflow is great. And that's important because where other lights are going to have a much larger enclosure, which allows for bigger heat sinks, more slower fans, this unit is really relying on that venting, the fan, and the heatsink in there to do all of the work, and it really does have to make sure that it stays cool. Because of that, as you up the intensity, the fan will spin up in order to keep the light at a sensible operating temperature. Now, I haven't found this to be too much of an issue. The first thing I did when I got it was turn it on and just dial up the intensity and then see how the fan tried to accommodate keeping the temperature versus making a noise. It does spin up. When you go into the max mode, it gets considerably louder. And that could be a challenge for people if they are working in an environment where they have to record sound. If you're just doing B-roll, not a problem at all. If you are placing the light far away from your subject, it's probably not a problem either. If you're placing the light outside, not a problem. Interesting point, assuming that you're in the max mode, everything that you do within the app will keep you within the max mode. But if you want to change in and out of the max mode, I think that you have to go and do it directly on the unit by pushing those two front buttons. In a room like this, if you get the light, turn it on, put it into the max mode, which just requires pushing those two front control buttons down, and then you're into that mode, I think you're going to feel it's a very loud fan. However, when I used it outside, and I have taken this out and done real shoots with it, so I went out into the wilderness, set up the lights on a hillside, ran them off a big Anker 555 power bank, and that actually worked very nicely. You know, they were able to illuminate a whole tree line and part of the hill and get me enough level that I was able to shoot f2.8 and ISO 1600, I think I was at on that, on the Blackmagic Pocket camera, and actually came out really well. And you can see the difference between having the lights on and having no light at all. This perhaps isn't the most perfectly lit night scene I've ever done, but it's just me by myself in a small vehicle, driving out into the middle of nowhere, setting this up, and being able to light that much space with things that I can basically carry in my hands in one go and a very small light stand. In that sense, it's really freeing to be able to use them like that. Now, in that environment, I did not notice the fans at all, either because I'm so far away that it's just not going to be an issue, or because when they're outside, and there's actually air and it's not baking hot, the fans don't need to spin up as much, because that's something else. The ambient temperature is going to affect when the fans want to kick in, because the light's going to be able to get the heat away from the elements quicker if it's cooler out. And I think that when I was on the hill, I was quite surprised, having tested them indoors, at how quiet they seemed, because there's nothing for the sound to bounce off. There's a lot more air that is cooler for them to suck through, and it really did feel like I could use them and not worry about sound at all. Now, I did do another shoot in an environment where sound was far more critical, filming an opera singer in a large church, and I had the mics relatively far away from the singer. This isn't like sort of what I've got set up just here, where I'm really close to the mic. The microphone, I think in this scenario, is 6 or 7 feet away from the singer and the pianist. In that environment, the mic was, I think, 3 feet away from the MOLUS G300 that I had working as a key light. Ribbon microphone, it's sensitive on the front and the back, so it's definitely going to catch something if it's there. I had another MOLUS down the far end of the church, and that's creating a sheen across the floor. And then I was using a couple of X60s just to create a lovely blooming warmth on this back wall, along with a Cinepeer CM25, just for the pianist to be able to see the music, because everything, you know, with my lighting go around isn't helping them. They had a lamp there that they normally use. I didn't like the look of it. I didn't want it in shot, and the color temperature was off for what we were balancing to, which was broadly speaking daylight, and that was very, very tungsten. So I took that out, used the Cinepeer instead, and I was able to control the intensity and also the color temperature of it. So that made far more sense for me, looked far better. So yeah, that's what we did. So between those 5 lights, I was able to balance everything out, not get tons of fan noise, and actually in this open space I was able to use the key light G300 at about 12%. So I really was not pushing that light at all, and it was giving me plenty of level. Bearing in mind that's going through the softbox, which is a 90 centimeter softbox from Zhiyun, the parabolic softbox. Super quick to set up. It took me maybe 5 minutes the first time I've set it, so I had to put the inner diffusion in and the outer diffusion as well, and that was a breeze. Pops into place, no rods to slide down. There are elements of it that are plastic, so I will be interested to check back on that product and see how it does over the course of a few months in terms of taking it out on shoots and just seeing about wear and tear. But for this, it was what the doctor ordered. It worked really well. Mic did not pick up any fan noise. I could not hear the fans in the room, and even the light that was in the back, which was working at a higher intensity just with the reflector on for that slash of light, didn't hear it. Now, the one thing that I would really like Zhiyun to implement, perhaps in a firmware update, is being able to lock the fan to a certain speed. So at a certain point, I don't mind if the fan is going, as long as it's going consistently. But if the fan goes up and then goes down as it needs to, it's harder to take out in post. And it also becomes more obvious that there's something there, but a constant gentle noise at a certain threshold is far, far less obvious, and you can get room tone for it, and maybe you can even remove it in post as well. Now, I don't know if I'm missing this in the firmware, so if I am, someone comment below, someone slap me on the hand and say, no, you can do that already. But if we can do that in the firmware, that'd be great. Now, I have used the app with these as well. I was able to bond everything up first time, really straightforward, just Bluetooth reset each of the lamp heads, and then I was able to add the G300s and the X60s to the ZY Vega app, and then control all of the different settings of the lights remotely, looking at the camera and just getting the levels where I want them. That's how I set the levels. You can also control the color temperature from the app there as well. In the UK, they're retailing for this. In the US, they are retailing for this. Am I going to recommend at those prices that you go out and buy them? If you're looking for a light that's 300 watts and bicolor, they are a serious contender. So this has been my review of the MOLUS G300. Comments down below. I do have affiliate links, so if you wanted to purchase this or other products, you can use those and I will receive some money in return. Obviously, that does open up the ethical question of whether I'm just trying to sell this to you, so you use the affiliate link. If you feel that, mention in the comments. Interrogate me, ask me questions. I'm here to answer any questions that you have about how I've been using these. Watch some of the other reviews. Definitely watch Andrew Locke and Luke Servold's review of this light, if they have them. I'm sure they will. Those guys, I always notice something in their review and I think, oh God, you've hit the nail on the head with something they mention about, how it could be used, or a little pitfall of something that you just don't spot unless you have that level of expertise. See you next time.